So there I was, getting arrested at my own housewarming party, 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, and I'm standing on my front lawn in handcuffs while police lights paint the whole neighborhood red and blue. The Karen next door is shrieking at police officers, "Arrest him! He's corrupting our neighborhood!" But here's the thing that still cracks me up. The 15 dangerous criminals she called 911 about are off-duty cops eating my burgers. I'm standing there in cuffs, watching my HOA president have a complete meltdown in front of half the police department, and all I can think is, "Lady, you have no idea what you just started." See, Karen thought she was dealing with some random new guy she could bully out of the neighborhood. She had no clue I'd spent 2 years documenting every illegal thing she'd done. The fraud, the discrimination, the thousands she'd stolen from my neighbors. Tonight was supposed to be a simple housewarming. Instead, it became the night an entire community learned they'd been scammed. What would you do if your HOA was stealing from you? Where are you watching from? Comment below. This story's about to get wild. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. 3 months ago, I was Garrett Holloway, 34, recently divorced, and desperately needing a fresh start. After 8 years as a firefighter-paramedic, I'd finally made detective with the county police. The divorce had cleaned me out financially, but I managed to scrape together enough for a down payment on a little house in Willowbrook Estates. Now, Willowbrook wasn't fancy, just a middle-class neighborhood built in the 90s. 200 homes ranging from $180K to $220K, filled with young families, retirees, and hardworking folks like me. The HOA kept things looking decent. Nice common areas, a little lake, playground for the kids. On paper, it looked perfect for starting over. The house itself was a modest 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street. Nothing special, but it was mine. After 6 months in a cramped apartment that smelled like my upstairs neighbor's cat and cigarettes, having my own garage felt like winning the lottery. That's when I met Diane Rothschild and learned that some people can make paradise feel like prison. Picture your worst nightmare of an HOA president, then add a law degree she never used and a husband who makes good money selling insurance. Diane was mid-50s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair that defied humidity, and had held the HOA presidency for 3 consecutive terms. She lived in the biggest house in the neighborhood. Corner lot, extra garage, probably worth 50 grand more than everyone else's. Moving day was a Saturday in July, hotter than Satan's armpit with that sticky humidity that makes your shirt cling like plastic wrap. The diesel exhaust from my moving truck mixed with the sweet smell of someone's freshly cut grass. Normal suburban sounds, lawnmower humming, kids playing, dogs barking. Then came the click, click, click of heels on asphalt. "Excuse me," the tone could have frozen beer. "Are you the new owner?" I turned to see Diane approaching with a clipboard, measuring tape, and the expression of someone who'd just discovered dog poop on her shoe. She was wearing white capri pants and a pink polo, the uniform of suburban authority. "Yes, ma'am, Garrett Holloway. Just moving in today." Diane Rothschild, HOA president. She didn't offer her hand. Instead, she eyeballed my moving truck like it was leaking nuclear waste. "I need to inform you that your vehicle is violating several community standards. Here's a pro tip. When someone uses the phrase community standards within 5 minutes of meeting you, run. Trust me on this." Out came the measuring tape. She documented everything. How far the truck extended, its height, even the fact that cardboard boxes were visible. The scratch of her pen on the citation pad sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Traffic flow regulations, aesthetic standards, and noise ordinances," she rattled off. "Commercial vehicles require prior approval. Ma'am, it's a moving truck, on moving day. I'll have it gone by evening." Her smile was colder than my ex-wife's lawyers. "Mr. Holloway, this isn't the type of neighborhood where people just come and go. We have standards here, property values to maintain." The way she said "people" made my cop instincts start buzzing. The pause before "come and go." Her eyes taking inventory of my work clothes, my diverse group of helpers, even the bumper stickers on my pickup. By the time she clicked away on those heels, I had my first official HOA citation, before I'd even gotten my couch through the front door. That evening, unpacking boxes in my kitchen, Betty Bellamy knocked softly. My 70-year-old neighbor brought homemade cookies and whispered warnings. "Don't take it personal, honey," she said, glancing nervously toward Diane's mansion. She's got issues with anyone who doesn't fit her idea of neighborhood quality. The Rodriguez family before you? She made their lives hell until they packed up and left. As I watched Betty scurry home like she'd just passed state secrets, one thought crystallized. This wasn't about trucks or standards. This was about power. And Diane Rothschild was about to learn that some people don't break as easily as others. Week 2 in paradise, and Diane was already making my life interesting. I'm talking full-blown surveillance operation. This woman had apparently appointed herself the neighborhood's one-person CIA. Every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m., I'd hear that familiar click, click, click of heels on pavement. There's Diane, armed with a digital camera and clipboard, documenting every car that had the audacity to park within a 3-block radius of my house. The woman took more photos than a tourist at Disney World, and with about the same level of enthusiasm. The thing about being a cop is you notice patterns, and Diane's pattern was crystal clear. Any vehicle remotely connected to me became a violation. My buddy Marcus from the fire department drops off some tools, commercial vehicle violation. Detective Santos swings by to grab case files, unauthorized overnight parking, even though she left at 10 p.m. My neighbor Tom's landscaping trailer sitting in his driveway every weekend, complete radio silence from our HOA president. The emails started flowing like a broken fire hydrant, subject lines that read like FBI bulletins, urgent, traffic safety concerns, and Willowbrook security alert. Diane was building a paper trail that would impress a federal prosecutor. Every license plate number, every timestamp, every breathless description of suspicious activity, which apparently included paramedics existing in her general vicinity. Here's where my detective training kicked in. I decided to do a little background research of my own. You spend enough time running database searches for police work, you pick up habits. So I'm sitting at my kitchen table Wednesday night, laptop open, coffee getting cold, digging into public records. That's when I stumbled across something interesting. Richard Rothschild, Diane's husband, owns Rothschild Insurance Group. And wouldn't you know it, his company holds the liability policy for our entire HOA. Now, I'd read enough nonprofit law during my criminal justice degree to know that board members have to disclose financial conflicts like this. Something about transparency and preventing self-dealing. Diane had been president for 3 years, and somehow this little detail never made it into any HOA newsletter. I'm processing this information when I smell something burning. Not dinner burning, electrical burning. That sharp metallic scent that makes every first responder's spine straighten. I step outside and spot the problem. The street light near my driveway is sparking like a 4th of July sparkler, throwing crazy shadows across the pavement. While I'm standing there in boxer shorts and a t-shirt, mentally calculating whether this is a fire hazard, guess who materializes from the darkness? Mr. Holloway, Diane's voice could have frozen hellfire. I need to discuss your ongoing violations. She's holding a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet. The dying streetlight flickers behind her, making her look like she stepped out of a Tim Burton movie. What violations would those be, Mrs. Rothschild? Your work associates continue disturbing the peace with their commercial vehicles. The covenant clearly states, Actually, I interrupted, I've been reading those covenants myself. Fascinating document. Been doing some homework on public records too. Her pen stopped clicking. In the flickering light, I watched her expression shift from smugly confident to mildly concerned. I'm not sure what you mean. Your husband's insurance company, the one that happens to hold our HOA's liability policy. Funny how that never came up in any board meetings. For just a second, maybe 2, her perfect composure cracked like ice on a windshield. The smell of burning wire got stronger and I could hear sirens in the distance. Someone else had called in the electrical hazard. I don't see how that's relevant to your parking violations. Neither do I, but I'm curious what the other residents would think about it. She stood there for a moment, streetlight sparking above us like a dying star, probably realizing that the quiet new guy she'd been bullying had just shown his teeth. This conversation isn't over, Mr. Holloway. No, ma'am, I don't think it is. She clicked away into the darkness, leaving me standing under electrical fireworks, holding printouts of business registrations and wondering exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. The next morning brought a certified letter. Emergency HOA board meeting, Friday night, 7 p.m. Agenda item. Pattern of violations and community safety concerns. 412 Maple Street. That's when I knew this wasn't about parking anymore. This was war. I spent Thursday evening making copies of everything. Every email she'd sent, every photo she'd taken, every citation issued. Then I did what any good investigator does. I created a comparison chart. Tom Bradley's landscaping trailer parked overnight every weekend for 2 years, 0 citations. The Johnsons' teenage son rebuilding a motorcycle in full view every Saturday? Nothing. Mrs. Peterson's weekly bridge club bringing 8 cars to her cul-de-sac? Diane apparently loves bridge. But paramedics stopping by Garrett Holloway's house? Crime against humanity. Friday arrived hotter than a pizza oven. The community center reeked of industrial carpet and decades of awkward meetings. 5 board members sat behind a folding table that had seen better decades, while Diane commanded a makeshift podium with her folder of accusations. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we have a serious problem." I sat in the back row with my own evidence folder, watching her present her case like I was public enemy number 1. When she finished, the silence was so complete you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing their death song overhead. "Mr. Holloway," the board president said wearily, "would you like to respond?" I stood up, feeling every eye in the room. "Yes, sir, I believe I would." Standing in that musty community center, surrounded by 5 tired board members and 1 very confident HOA president, I felt like David walking up to Goliath. Except my slingshot was loaded with public records and a healthy dose of righteous anger. The room smelled like decades of bad coffee and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting that unflattering light that makes everyone look like they're dying slowly. "Thank you," I said, opening my folder with the deliberate care of a bomb technician. "I'd like to start by addressing Mrs. Rothschild's concerns about community safety." I pulled out my first exhibit, a crisp Google Earth printout of the neighborhood. This shows Tom Bradley's landscaping trailer parked in his driveway every weekend for 2 years. Citations issued, 0. I placed it on the scarred folding table where everyone could see. Diane's face started changing color like a chameleon having an identity crisis. "This," I continued, producing another photo with theatrical flair, "documents the Johnson boys' motorcycle restoration project. Every Saturday, tools scattered across the driveway, friends dropping by, music playing, total citations, also 0. The board members leaned forward like they were watching a magic show. You could practically hear their brains processing this information. "And this masterpiece," I said, laying down a photo of 8 cars crammed into Mrs. Peterson's cul-de-sac, "captures weekly bridge club night. But somehow, paramedics stopping by my house for 10 minutes constitutes a neighborhood emergency worthy of federal intervention." Board member Janet Walsh, a retired school teacher who still had that "I've seen every excuse in the book" look, picked up the photos with the intensity of someone grading final exams. "These dates are all accurate?" she asked, her teacher voice cutting through the tension. "Yes, ma'am. Documented and verified." I produced my spreadsheet, color-coded because I'm thorough like that. "I've tracked every citation issued in our neighborhood for the past year. The pattern is illuminating." Here's where I decided to twist the knife a little. I've also been brushing up on HOA governance law. You know how it is. Can't sleep, might as well read nonprofit regulations. A couple board members actually smiled at that. Turns out there are some interesting disclosure requirements for board members with financial conflicts. The temperature in the room dropped faster than my ex-wife's opinion of me during divorce proceedings. I looked directly at Diane, who was gripping her pen like a weapon. "Mrs. Rothschild, would you like to tell everyone about Rothschild Insurance Group? You know that moment in horror movies when the music stops and everything goes dead quiet? That was this room. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz softer." "I don't see how my husband's business," Diane started, but I was ready for her. "Rothschild Insurance Group has held our HOA's liability policy for 3 years. Same 3 years Mrs. Rothschild has served as president. State law requires board members to disclose financial relationships that could influence their decisions." Board President Mike Henderson looked like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. "Diane, is this accurate?" The silence stretched like taffy while Diane's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Finally, Richard bid the contract competitively. "It's completely above board." "I'm sure it was," I said, with the calm of someone who'd done their homework. "But transparency isn't optional. It's the law." That's when Diane decided to go nuclear. She slammed both hands on the podium, making everyone jump like they'd been shocked. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. This man is trying to deflect attention from his own violations. Her voice cracked with desperation. He brings strangers to our neighborhood at all hours. Work trucks, police cars, people we don't know. She pointed at me like I was carrying plague. How do we know these people aren't casing our homes, planning break-ins? The accusation hung in the air like sulfur from a match strike. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, the same feeling I got when suspects started lying to my face. Mrs. Rothschild, I said, my voice dropping to that cop tone that makes smart people shut up. Are you suggesting that police officers and paramedics are criminals? I'm suggesting, she said, her perfect composure unraveling like a cheap sweater, that some people attract elements that don't belong in family neighborhoods like ours. Bingo. There it was. The ugly truth wrapped in careful words. The way she emphasized some people and elements made every person in that room uncomfortable. Even Mike Henderson was shifting in his chair like his pants had caught fire. Diane, Mike said weakly, maybe we should— No! She was full-blown hysterical now, mascara starting to smudge. I've been protecting this community for 3 years, maintaining standards, preserving property values, and now you want to side with— She gestured at me like I was something that had crawled out of a storm drain. With what exactly, Mrs. Rothschild? I asked, still calm as a lake at dawn. A homeowner who pays his dues and follows the actual rules? Janet Walsh's phone glowed as she pulled up state law websites. Mike Henderson studied my documentation like it contained the location of buried treasure. The sound of pages turning filled the awkward silence. State law is clear, Janet announced, her teacher voice brooking no argument. Financial conflicts must be disclosed within 30 days. This should have been reported years ago. That's when I knew I had her. Diane's desperation was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The meeting ended with all the awkward energy of a family reunion where someone mentioned politics. Mike Henderson mumbled about further review, while Diane packed her papers with hands shaking like she'd had too much caffeine. As she passed my chair, she leaned down and hissed, "You think you're so smart, we'll see about that." She smelled like desperation wrapped in expensive perfume. Monday morning hit like a slap to the face. I'm pouring coffee when I hear the now familiar click, click, click outside. Through my kitchen window, I watch Diane emerge from her house dressed like she's attending a funeral. All business, all black, carrying enough measuring equipment to survey the Panama Canal. This wasn't her usual drive-by photo session. This was a full-scale forensic investigation of my property. The woman measured everything with the intensity of a crime scene tech. Grass height with an actual ruler. Who does that? Distance from my mailbox to the curb. She even crawled around on her hands and knees examining my driveway for cracks, her black pants collecting dust like evidence. The morning air was crisp with dew and the smell of someone's bacon, but all I could focus on was this woman treating my lawn like it had murdered someone. By Wednesday, my mailbox was stuffed fuller than a Thanksgiving turkey. Citation after citation, each more ridiculous than the last. Grass height violation exceeds community standard by 0.7 inches. Mailbox paint deviation, color variance from approved specifications. And my personal favorite, waste receptacle visibility infraction. Apparently my trash cans were visible from the street for 12 minutes instead of the regulation 10. Each fine escalated like a video game boss fight. $50, $75, $100. By Friday morning, I was staring at over $400 in penalties for the crime of existing in Diane's neighborhood. But here's where things got interesting. Diane wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was building an army. I started noticing her making the rounds like a door-to-door politician, knocking on houses, carrying those manila folders, wearing that fake smile that probably hurt her face muscles, whispered conversations at mailboxes, pointed stares when neighbors walked past my house with their dog suddenly pulling them to the opposite sidewalk. The psychological warfare was working. Mrs. Henderson couldn't make eye contact anymore. The young couple 3 houses down started parking like I had the plague. Even Tom Bradley, who'd been friendly since day one, seemed nervous when he waved. Saturday morning, I'm washing my truck when Betty Bellamy appears like a nervous ghost, shuffling over while glancing around like she's about to confess to murder. "Honey," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over my garden hose, "you need to know what lies she's spreading." The soap suds on my truck started forming little rainbows in the morning light as Betty delivered the bad news. "She's telling people your work schedule is suspicious. All those police cars visiting." Betty's hands fluttered like trapped birds. "She's suggesting you might be dealing drugs." I nearly dropped my sponge. "She's what now?" "And those friends who come by? She's convinced half the street they're casing houses for burglaries. Showed Mrs. Patterson some crime statistics she found online." Betty's eyes kept darting toward Diane's fortress. "Says crime's gone up since you moved here." The familiar heat rose in my chest. That cop instinct when someone crosses from annoying into dangerous territory. "Betty, has crime actually increased around here?" "Honey, the only criminal activity is what that woman's doing to your reputation." That afternoon, I did what detectives do best. I investigated. Real crime statistics for our zip code over 2 years showed break-ins had decreased 18% since I moved in. Turns out having a cop in the neighborhood actually helps. Who would have thought? But Sunday brought Diane's masterpiece. I found it taped to my front door like a eviction notice. Citation for unauthorized landscape modification resulting in aesthetic disruption of community visual harmony. My crime? Adding a $12 bag of decorative river rocks around my flower bed. You know, those smooth stones that every Home Depot in America sells to suburban dads trying to make their yards look less pathetic. Fine amount, $650. The letter demanded I remove this unauthorized hardscape installation within 15 days or face escalated legal enforcement action and potential litigation. Because apparently, small rocks are the gateway drug to neighborhood anarchy. Standing in my driveway holding this ridiculous piece of paper while the smell of Sunday morning pancakes drifted from normal families having normal weekends, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about rocks or grass or mailboxes. This was about a woman who'd built her entire identity around controlling other people, and I represented everything she couldn't control. Someone who knew the law, kept records, and refused to be intimidated. That's when I made the call that would change everything. County Recorder's Office? Hi, this is Detective Holloway. I need to research some HOA incorporation documents. By Tuesday afternoon, I'd found something that made her insurance conflict look like a jaywalking ticket. Something that would turn Diane's perfect little kingdom into a house of cards in a hurricane. Something that proved she'd been stealing from every single one of my neighbors for years. Game over, Diane. You just didn't know it yet. Tuesday afternoon at the county recorder's office felt like Christmas morning for a detective with trust issues. The place smelled like decades of bureaucracy. That unique cocktail of old paper, industrial coffee, and the dreams of citizens seeking justice through paperwork. I'd walked in looking for basic HOA incorporation documents, expecting maybe an hour of boring legal research. What I found instead made my hands actually tremble as I turned the pages. The original 1994 Willowbrook Estates covenants were sitting right there in black and white, clear as a confession. Maximum penalty for covenant violations shall not exceed $25. $25 per incident. $25. That was the legal limit. Period. But tucked into a different folder, I found Diane's 2019 Enhanced Enforcement Guidelines, a document that looked official enough to fool a federal judge. It authorized fines up to $800 per violation, complete with legal-sounding phrases about community standards preservation and escalated compliance protocols. Here's the kicker. The original covenants required any fine increases to be approved by 75% of homeowners through written ballot. Not a board meeting, not a simple vote. 3/4 of the entire neighborhood had to agree in writing to raise penalty amounts. That vote never happened. I checked every HOA record going back 6 years. Diane had been running an illegal extortion racket from day one. My hands were actually shaking as I started calculating. The Rodriguez family, $800 for their vegetable garden. Marcus Webb, $400 for his kids' sidewalk chalk. Mrs. Patterson, $300 for hosting Bridge Club. Tom Bradley, $250 for parking his work truck at his own house. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects while I tallied 5 years of systematic theft. Page after page of families bullied into paying illegal fines, thinking they had no choice but to comply or face lawsuits. Total fraudulent collections, $21,847. Nearly $22,000 stolen from hardworking neighbors who trusted their HOA president to follow the law. But the best part? Following the money trail like breadcrumbs leading to a gingerbread house. Every illegal fine got deposited into HOA accounts. Then mysteriously, the association started paying for premium landscaping services from something called Willowbrook Property Solutions. I pulled the business registration for Willowbrook Property Solutions, and there it was in official state records. Owner, Richard Rothschild, Diane's husband, the same Richard whose insurance company held the HOA contract. The Rothschilds had turned our entire neighborhood into their personal piggy bank, shaking down families while pretending to maintain community standards. I leaned back in that squeaky government chair, surrounded by evidence that could send 2 people to prison, and felt something I hadn't experienced since my first big collar as a rookie. That electric surge when you realize you're not just solving a case, you're about to take down an entire criminal enterprise. The late afternoon sun painted golden rectangles across the document table as I fed quarters into the copy machine. $22,000 in theft, 5 years of fraud, dozens of families scammed by the woman they'd elected to protect their property values. Diane thought she was bullying some quiet newcomer who'd eventually give up and move away, just like the Rodriguez family. What she'd actually done was pick a fight with someone who specialized in building criminal cases against people who thought they were untouchable. Walking out of that building, manila envelope full of evidence under my arm, I felt the power balance shift completely. Diane Rothschild had been playing chess while I'd been playing checkers. Now I was about to flip the board entirely. She had no idea that her perfectly orchestrated intimidation campaign had just handed me everything I needed to destroy her life. The question wasn't whether I could stop her anymore. The question was how public I wanted to make her humiliation. And after 5 years of families like the Rodriguez clan being driven from their homes by illegal extortion, I was thinking very, very public. Wednesday evening found me sitting at my kitchen table like a general planning D-Day, except instead of liberating France, I was about to liberate Willowbrook estates from 5 years of legalized theft. The smell of leftover pizza mixed with the intoxicating scent of justice as I spread out my evidence across the scratched wooden surface. $22,000 in fraud, an entire neighborhood held hostage by a woman with a measuring tape and a god complex. Time to throw the most educational housewarming party in suburban history. First ally, Betty Bellamy, because every revolution needs someone who remembers everything. I knocked on her door at 7 p.m. sharp, manila folder tucked under my arm like classified documents. Betty opened up wearing fuzzy slippers and the expression of someone expecting bad news. "Honey, you look like you've discovered buried treasure." Close. I've discovered buried crime. Her living room smelled like lavender sachets and decades of careful living. When I laid out the evidence, original covenants, Diane's illegal fine schedules, the money trail to her husband's company, Betty's hands flew to her mouth like she was trying to catch escaped words. "That poor Rodriguez family," she whispered, staring at their $800 citation for growing vegetables. "They saved 3 years for that down payment, had to move back in with Maria's parents when they couldn't afford Diane's penalties." "Not just them, Betty. 30 families over 5 years. I pulled out my legal pad, already half filled with names and amounts. "I need your help contacting everyone. We're going to make this right, but I need witnesses." Next stop, Marcus Webb, young dad who'd learned the hard way that sidewalk chalk is apparently a felony in Diane's world. I found him in his garage Thursday night, helping his 6-year-old build a birdhouse while the smell of sawdust and wood stain filled the air. When I showed him proof that his $400 fine was completely fabricated, his sandpaper stopped moving mid-stroke. "You're telling me she just invented those numbers?" "Worse. She's been running a protection racket disguised as community standards." I watched his jaw muscles work as the full scope hit him. "Marcus, how do you feel about getting your money back? With interest?" His daughter looked up from her birdhouse. "Daddy, why does your face look angry?" "Because sometimes grown-ups do bad things to other grown-ups, sweetheart, but Mr. Garrett's going to help fix it." Out of the mouths of babes. Tom Bradley was my third recruit, and the man was basically a forensic accountant disguised as a retired electrician. His workshop smelled like motor oil and organized rebellion as he pulled out filing cabinets that would make the IRS weep with joy. "Every receipt, every citation, every interaction with that woman," he said, cracking open a beer while spreading documents across his workbench. "Always knew something stunk about her operation. You really think we can nail her? Tom, by the time Saturday's over, Diane Rothschild's going to regret ever learning the phrase, community standards." But the masterstroke came Thursday afternoon when I reached out to my police colleagues. "See, When you work with 15 guys who've been looking for an excuse to fire up a grill and escape their wives' honey-do lists, party planning becomes surprisingly simple. "You sure about this, Holloway?" Detective Santos asked during our shift briefing, her voice carrying that tone cops use when they think you're about to do something spectacularly stupid. Having half the department at your housewarming might look like you're showing off. "Maria, trust me. By Saturday, having police present is going to be the most normal thing happening on my street." The coordination phase felt like organizing a military operation, except with more potato salad and fewer explosives. Betty handled victim outreach. Turned out Diane had scammed families across the entire neighborhood. Marcus managed social media, creating a private Facebook group that spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. Tom worked on documentation, turning 5 years of illegal citations into a timeline that read like a RICO case. Friday brought my ace in the hole, Channel 7's Jennifer Mills, an investigative reporter who'd made her career exposing corruption with the enthusiasm of a shark in bloody water. "Detective Holloway, I remember you from that city council story. What have you got?" "Jennifer, how would you like an exclusive on suburban fraud that's been going on for 5 years? Complete with documentation, victims willing to go on camera, and a live confrontation happening Saturday?" The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before she practically purred into the phone. "I'll bring a full crew." Saturday morning arrived with that crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. I fired up my grill, the same one Diane had tried to cite as an unauthorized cooking appliance, and started prepping enough burgers to feed a revolution. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid mixed with the sweet scent of impending justice. By noon, my quiet street looked like a block party designed by Karma herself. Police cars lining both sides, neighbors carrying covered dishes and 5 years of suppressed rage, Betty with poster boards showing Diane's greatest scams, Marcus live streaming to the neighborhood Facebook group. Channel 7's news van pulled up at 1:30 just as I flipped the first burgers. Through my kitchen window, I watched Diane standing in her yard like a general watching her army dessert. The woman who'd terrorized families for half a decade was about to learn what accountability looked like, and it was going to be beautiful. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, Diane decided to fire the first shot in what would become the shortest war in HOA history. I'm in my kitchen, coffee brewing and bacon sizzling, when I hear the familiar click, click, click of her heels marching across my driveway like she owns the place. Through my window, I watch her approach my front door carrying what looks like legal documents and wearing the expression of someone who thinks they're about to deliver a knockout punch. The doorbell rang with all the authority of a fire alarm. "Mr. Holloway?" Her voice could have frozen boiling water. "I'm serving you with an emergency cease and desist order." She thrust a manila envelope at me like it was radioactive. The smell of her aggressive perfume mixed with my morning bacon, creating an olfactory experience I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. "Emergency cease and desist of what, Mrs. Rothschild?" "Your unauthorized gathering violates multiple community covenants. Section 4.7 requires advance approval for any social function exceeding 6 people. Section 8.2 prohibits commercial food preparation on residential property." She was reading from a clipboard like she was reciting Miranda rights. "The fine for proceeding without compliance is $800 payable immediately." Here's the beautiful thing about knowing the law. You recognize creative fiction when you hear it. "Ma'am, I've read our actual covenants. There's no such requirement for social gatherings, and barbecuing in my own backyard isn't commercial food preparation." Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the twitch developing under her left eye. "Furthermore, I have safety concerns about your associates gathering in a residential area. I'm within my rights to contact law enforcement about this potential public disturbance." That's when I realized Diane was about to make the tactical error of the century. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice calm as Sunday morning. "You should definitely call the police about my associates." The confusion that flickered across her face was worth the price of admission. While Diane retreated to plot her next move, I got a text from Marcus. "She's going door to door again. Mrs. Henderson looks scared." 20 minutes later, Betty called. "Honey, she's telling people your party is some kind of gang gathering. Says having all those police cars will bring down property values." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. By 10 a.m., Diane had escalated to what I can only describe as psychological warfare tactics that would make a military strategist proud. She positioned herself in her front yard with a lawn chair and clipboard, documenting every car that arrived, Every person who walked to my door, every breath anyone took within a 50-yard radius of my property. The woman had turned surveillance into performance art. Detective Santos arrived early with her family, took one look at Diane's surveillance operation, and started laughing so hard she snorted. "Is that your HOA president conducting reconnaissance on a police cookout? That's Diane. She's about to call 911 on you. Can't wait." By noon, my street looked like a law enforcement family reunion. 15 cops, their families, neighbors carrying covered dishes, and one increasingly desperate HOA president documenting everything like she was building a case for the United Nations. That's when Diane played her nuclear option. The 911 call came at 12:47 p.m. I know the exact time because Detective Mills was standing next to me when his radio crackled with the dispatch. "All units, we have a report of suspicious gathering with multiple armed individuals at 4 and 12 Maple Street. Caller reports possible gang activity, requests immediate response." Mills looked at his radio, looked at the dozen off-duty cops eating potato salad in my backyard, and keyed his microphone. "Dispatch, responding Unit 247. Be advised, suspicious gathering appears to be, police department barbecue. Will investigate and advise." The radio silence that followed was deafening. 3 patrol cars responded because 911 calls require response, even ridiculous ones. When Officers Johnson and Martinez climbed out of their vehicles and saw their sergeant flipping burgers on my grill, the expression on their faces was priceless. But the real entertainment was watching Diane realize her 911 gambit had backfired spectacularly. She marched across the street in full battle mode, pointing at my backyard like she was identifying criminals in a lineup. "Officers, I called about the armed gathering. These people don't belong in our neighborhood." Officer Johnson, a 20-year veteran who'd worked security at my daughter's high school basketball games, looked confused as hell. "Ma'am, these are police officers having a barbecue." "I don't care what they claim to be. This is a family neighborhood. We have standards." That's when Channel 7's news van turned the corner, camera crew already rolling, and Diane's face went white as fresh paint. She hadn't just called the police on the police. She'd done it on live television. The smell of grilled onions mixed with Diane's panic sweat, as she realized she'd just created the exact public spectacle she'd been trying to prevent. Jennifer Mills stepped out of the news van with the predatory smile of a reporter who'd just won the lottery. "Mrs. Rothschild? I'm Jennifer Mills, Channel 7 News. I understand you're concerned about community safety." Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Game over. The moment Jennifer Mills stepped out of that news van, clipboard in hand and camera crew trailing behind her like hungry wolves, I knew Diane's carefully constructed world was about to implode in real time. But Diane, bless her delusional heart, was still playing checkers while the rest of us had moved on to 3-dimensional chess. "I don't need to speak to any reporters," she snapped, backing away from the camera like it might bite her. "This is a private neighborhood matter." Jennifer smiled with the warmth of a loan shark collecting debts. "Mrs. Rothschild, we're here because we received information about potential HOA fraud affecting dozens of families. Would you care to comment?" The color drained from Diane's face faster than water down a storm drain. Around us, neighbors were emerging from houses like prairie dogs sensing danger, drawn by the unmistakable aroma of suburban drama reaching critical mass. "Fraud? That's completely ridiculous. I've served this community faithfully for 5 years." Her voice climbed an octave with each word. "This man," she pointed at me like I was patient zero in a plague outbreak, "is trying to destroy everything we've built here." What happened next was beautiful in the way that karma is beautiful, swift, merciless, and absolutely perfect. Betty Bellamy appeared at my side carrying a poster board that looked like a serial killer's evidence wall, except instead of tracking murders, it documented 5 years of illegal fines. The foam board was covered in printed citations, bank records, and a timeline that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. "Diane," Betty said, her voice carrying the authority of a retired teacher who'd dealt with playground bullies for 30 years, "would you like to explain why you charged the Rodriguez family $800 for planting tomatoes?" The camera swung toward the poster board, and I watched Jennifer Mills' eyes light up like she'd discovered buried treasure. Behind her, the cameraman zoomed in on Betty's documentation, capturing every illegal citation in high definition. "Those were legitimate covenant violations," Diane sputtered, but her voice lacked conviction. She looked like a defendant whose lawyer had just abandoned ship. That's when Marcus Webb stepped forward, his 6-year-old daughter holding his hand, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting about suburban justice. "Mrs. Rothschild," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tremor of barely controlled rage. "You fined me $400 because my daughter drew flowers on our sidewalk with chalk, washable chalk, on our own driveway." The little girl looked up at the camera with the devastating innocence only children possess. "I just wanted to make pretty pictures for Daddy." Even the hardened news crew looked ready to adopt this kid on the spot. Diane's composure was unraveling like a cheap sweater. "Children need to learn respect for community standards. We can't just let anyone do whatever they want." "What about what you've been doing?" Tom Bradley's voice cut through her excuses like a chainsaw through tissue paper. He stepped forward carrying a banker's box that looked like it weighed 40 pounds. 5 years of illegal fines, $22,000 stolen from working families, money that went straight to your husband's landscaping company. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear car engines idling 3 blocks away. Jennifer Mills practically lunged toward Tom's evidence box. "Mr. Bradley, are you saying Mrs. Rothschild has been operating an illegal fine scheme?" "I'm saying she's been running a protection racket disguised as an HOA," Tom replied, his electrician's hands steady as he pulled out documentation. "Every fine over $25 was completely illegal. We have the original covenants, the fabricated fine schedules, bank records showing where the money went." Diane looked around desperately, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. The crowd of neighbors had grown to about 30 people, all staring at her with the expression of villagers who'd just discovered their trusted leader was actually the wolf in sheep's clothing. "This is harassment," she shrieked, her voice cracking like ice under pressure. "You people are trying to destroy me because you can't handle legitimate authority. Some of you never belonged in a neighborhood like this anyway." There it was. The ugly truth she'd been hiding behind 5 years of manufactured civility. The racist undertones hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, and I watched several neighbors physically recoil from the venom in her voice. Detective Santos stepped forward, her badge visible on her belt, her expression shifting from amused observer to law enforcement professional. "Ma'am, I think you need to step back and consider your next words very carefully." But Diane was beyond rational thought. 5 years of unchallenged power had made her believe she was untouchable, and the realization that her kingdom was crumbling had broken whatever filter existed between her brain and her mouth. "I built this community. I protected property values. I kept out the undesirables." She was gesticulating wildly now, pointing at various neighbors, like she was conducting an orchestra of hatred. "And now you want to side with him?" The camera captured every word, every gesture, every moment of her spectacular self-destruction. Jennifer Mills stepped closer, microphone extended like a sword. "Mrs. Rothschild, are you admitting to discriminatory enforcement of HOA rules?" That's when Diane made her final, fatal mistake. Instead of walking away, instead of calling a lawyer, instead of exercising the right to remain silent that every cop in my backyard could have explained to her, she doubled down. "I'll shut this party down right now. I'll have every one of you arrested for trespassing." She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911 again. While standing in front of 6 police officers, on live television, I couldn't have scripted it better myself. What happened next will go down in suburban legend as the moment an entire neighborhood watched their HOA president commit career suicide in high definition. Diane stood there with her phone pressed to her ear, surrounded by 40 neighbors, 6 police officers, and a rolling news camera about to call 911 for the second time in an hour. The woman had apparently decided that if you're going to crash and burn, you might as well do it spectacularly. 911, yes, I need immediate assistance at 4 and 12 Maple Street. There's an illegal gathering, trespassing, and the police officers on scene are refusing to do their job. The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes tinkling 3 houses away. Detective Santos stepped forward, her badge catching the afternoon sunlight like a beacon of sanity in this circus of suburban madness. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to hang up that phone." But Diane was beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond any connection to reality. 5 years of unchallenged authority had created a monster who genuinely believed she could order the police department around like her personal security force. "No, I'm reporting police corruption. These officers are participating in an illegal gathering and refusing to arrest obvious lawbreakers." That's when Officer Johnson, 20-year veteran, father of 3, pillar of the community, started laughing. Not chuckling, not smirking, full-blown, bend-over-holding-your-sides laughing that made his radio equipment jingle. "Ma'am," he gasped between fits of laughter, "you're reporting police corruption. To the police. About police eating hamburgers at a police officer's house." The crowd erupted. 30 neighbors who'd been terrorized by this woman for years finally saw her for what she truly was, a petty tyrant with a clipboard and delusions of grandeur. Jennifer Mills stepped into the chaos like a conductor taking control of an orchestra. "Mrs. Rothschild, we have documentation here showing you've collected over $22,000 in illegal fines from your neighbors over 5 years. The original HOA covenants limit penalties to $25 maximum. How do you respond to allegations of fraud?" Diane spun around like a cornered animal, her perfect hair finally showing signs of the hurricane happening inside her head. "Those fines were completely legal. I have every right to enforce community standards. These people," she gestured wildly at the crowd, "want to turn our neighborhood into some kind of what?" Betty Bellamy stepped forward, her poster board evidence held high like a protest sign. "A place where children can draw with chalk, where families can grow vegetables, where working people don't get extorted for parking in their own driveways." The crowd murmured agreement, a sound like distant thunder building to a storm. Tom Bradley opened his evidence box and pulled out the original 1994 covenants. "These are the actual rules, Diane. $25 maximum fine, no exceptions, no escalation schedules, no enhanced enforcement protocols, just $25. He held the document up so the camera could see it clearly. "Everything you've done for 5 years has been theft, plain and simple." That's when I decided it was time for my mic drop moment. I walked to the center of the crowd, feeling every eye on me, carrying the manila folder that contained 5 years of documented fraud. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with the scent of justice finally being served. "Diane," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority that comes from having right on your side, "you made one critical mistake when you decided to target me." She stared at me with hatred so pure it was almost artistic. "You assumed I was just another neighbor you could bully into submission. But here's the thing about being a detective. We're trained to investigate crimes. And what you've been running here isn't an HOA. It's a criminal enterprise." I opened the folder and pulled out bank records, business registrations, and a timeline that connected every illegal fine to payments made to her husband's landscaping company. $22,000 in fraudulent fines, funneled directly to Willowbrook Property Solutions, owned by your husband. That's not community service, Diane. That's organized theft with a side of money laundering. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Jennifer Mills moved closer with her microphone. "Detective Holloway, are you saying this is a criminal matter?" "I'm saying I'll be filing a report with the district attorney's office Monday morning. Wire fraud, theft by deception, conspiracy to defraud, the whole Christmas list of financial crimes." Diane's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to catch flies. You can't. I was protecting this community. I was maintaining standards." "Ma'am," Detective Santos interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of official authority, "I think you need to contact an attorney, immediately." The crowd had grown quiet, sensing that we'd moved from neighborhood drama to something much more serious. Even the wind chimes had stopped jingling. Diane looked around at 40 faces staring back at her. Neighbors she'd terrorized, police officers she'd disrespected, reporters documenting her downfall, and one very satisfied detective who'd just dismantled her empire with a manila folder and the truth. "This isn't over," she whispered, but the words carried no weight. "Actually," I replied, "I think it is." She turned and walked toward her house, heels clicking on concrete one last time, leaving behind 5 years of lies and a neighborhood finally free to breathe. The party was just getting started. The silence that followed Diane's retreat lasted about 10 seconds before the neighborhood exploded into celebration like we'd just won the World Series. Marcus Webb started a slow clap that turned into thunderous applause. Betty Bellamy was crying happy tears while hugging her evidence poster. Tom Bradley popped open a beer and declared it the best damn barbecue in HOA history. Even the Channel 7 crew was grinning like they'd just uncovered Watergate in suburbia. But the real magic happened over the next hour, as 40 neighbors who'd been living in fear finally started talking to each other. "Mrs. Patterson admitted she'd been too scared to host bridge club for 2 years after Diane's gathering violation threats. The young couple down the street revealed they'd almost moved because they couldn't afford the fines for their teenagers having friends over. One by one, stories poured out like water from a broken dam. 5 years of intimidation, extortion, and community terrorism disguised as maintaining standards. Detective Santos pulled me aside while the news crew interviewed Betty about her evidence collection. "You know this is going to blow up beyond the neighborhood, right?" she said, nodding toward Jennifer Mills, who was already on her phone with what sounded like her assignment editor. "Financial fraud, civil rights violations, potential RICO charges if they can prove ongoing criminal enterprise. The DA's going to love this." She was right. Within a week, the story had legs that carried it far beyond Willowbrook Estates. Monday morning, I filed my report with the district attorney's office. By Tuesday, the state attorney general had opened an investigation into HOA fraud statewide. Wednesday brought a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of 37 families. Thursday's headline in the Metro section read, "Suburban Scam, HOA President Accused of 5-Year Fraud Scheme." Diane and Richard Rothschild hired expensive lawyers and tried to claim the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Didn't matter. When you steal $22,000 from working families and document everything in official HOA records, misunderstanding isn't really a viable defense. The legal resolution came faster than anyone expected. Facing federal wire fraud charges and a mountain of evidence that would make Al Capone jealous, the Rothschilds pled no contest in exchange for full restitution plus damages. Every family got their illegal fines refunded, with interest. The Rodriguez clan, who'd been driven from their home by Diane's extortion, got enough money to buy a bigger house 2 neighborhoods over. But the real victory was watching our community transform. Betty Bellamy was elected HOA president unanimously, running on a platform of common sense and actual legal compliance. Her first act was implementing transparent financial reporting and requiring board approval for any fine over the legal $25 limit. Her second act was organizing monthly potluck dinners that actually brought neighbors together instead of driving them apart. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates had become the kind of neighborhood people actually wanted to live in. Property values did go up. Turns out removing criminal management improves market appeal. The playground got new equipment funded by recovered fraud money. We started an annual block party that makes my housewarming look like a quiet dinner. The Rothschilds moved to Florida, where I'm told they're keeping a very low profile and paying their HOA dues on time without complaint. As for me, well, turns out standing up to neighborhood bullies makes you pretty popular with the community. I've got more dinner invitations than I can handle. My lawn maintenance gets mysteriously done by grateful neighbors. And Betty's visiting niece, the one who's a teacher, has been asking when I'm free for that dinner we talked about. But the best part happened 3 months ago. A young Hispanic family moved into the house where the Rodriguezes used to live. Maria and Carlos Hernandez, with twin daughters who love drawing chalk art on their driveway. When they asked nervously about HOA rules for children's activities, I just smiled and handed them a copy of the actual covenants. $25 maximum fine for any violation, I told them. And trust me, nobody's going to mess with your kids drawing flowers. Last week, we started the Willowbrook Community Scholarship Fund using leftover restitution money. Every year, we'll give $1,000 to a local high school graduate pursuing a career in public service, police, fire, teaching, social work. Because sometimes the best way to honor justice is making sure the next generation knows how to fight for it. So here's my advice. If you're dealing with HOA corruption, document everything, know your rights, and remember that bullies only have power when good people stay silent. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. You're not alone, and knowledge is power. And hey, if this story helped you or made you laugh, hit that subscribe button. There are more neighborhood tyrants out there who need taking down, and I've got plenty more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they decide they've had enough. Justice tastes better when it's shared with friends.